Gate 1, Darkness, the world of demons. Look around you. They're everywhere. Gate 2, my guards are watching you. Gate 3, only evil lives here. Gate 4, there's no way out. Gate 5, field of fire. Gate 6, pick up your weapons and fight. And dance with the devil! The gates are open.
2, 1. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Disconnection. Disconnection. Disconnection.
Disconnection.
Disconnection.
targeting, and Night Elf doesn't need to. So this kind of buff just makes Elf stronger in every single way, in every single matchup. And that doesn't feel fantastic to me unless it is combined with other races also getting buffed on average, and or with other nerfs to other things or something. Like if this tends to be a good change. So I wonder, where is this targeting? Maybe this is targeting Night Elves getting rushed by undead and by human. And I can kind of see that this can be a problem for them. Getting swamped by footmen, ghouls, skeletons, water elementals can put quite a burden on the Night Elf and their healthy economy and defense ability. So let's say if this happens, then what else happens, right? In a standard situation of Elf against human, we're gonna have to break this down a bit one by one. So Night Elf fights human, and they can either start with Keeper, Demon, or Warden. Each have their own strengths and weaknesses. Warden can be really tough to survive against like an Archmage, Blood Mage, Rush. Demon Hunter is just solid, but also doesn't offer a lot of like unit pick-off potential compared to like a Keeper. And the Keeper does have unit pick-off potential, but can really drop off once the human gets a fortified weaknesses. Warden can be really tough to survive against like an Archmage, Blood Mage, Rush. Demon Hunter is just solid, but also doesn't offer a lot of like unit pick-off potential compared to like a Keeper. And the Keeper does have unit pick-off potential, but can really drop off once the human gets a fortified expansion location with towers, and eventually unlocks priests as well, if that's what they're going for. So each one has strengths and weaknesses, right? So how does Night Elf with Keeper change against human? We're going to compare everything, for instance. Force of Nature is a little cheaper, and if they can get to Tranquility, it's better. They have more Moonwell regen, Wisp HP. Again, I need to dedicate a chapter to that, but we're just going to touch upon it without in-depth discussing it. Keeper Night Elf against human gets 10 Wisp HP, Moonwell regen, Force of Nature mana cost reduction, Tranquility, Nature's Blessing lumber cost reduction. Those 5 together, that's 5 buffs to the Keeper meta against human without any downsides. Then you look at human. What does human get against Night Elf? They lose Arcane Tower hero feedback burn. They don't really do much Flame Strike against Keeper. They don't get much Knights against Keeper or Polymorph. Not a lot of control magic. They do use Riflemen somewhat, perhaps. And maybe you could do Dragonhawk Riders because they can't get entangled. So human probably requires innovation, if that's possible, to try and go for Dragonhawk Riders against Keeper. But for the most part, this seems to be a summary of like 7 buffs for Night Elf against human. So I think that's risky. Yeah, I don't know exactly where. Like, does Keeper Night Elf need 7 buffs against human? I'm not sure about it. I think it's too much. And now let's talk a bit about Wisp, and then we'll talk more about other Night Elf versus human. Wisp HP increase from 120 to 130. So first, Orc Peons are 250. Human Peasants are 220. And Acolytes, I think, are 230 right now. Acolytes are 230. So you've got 220, 230, 250, Wisp 120. On the face of it, you're like, oh my god, Wisp has so much less HP. But on the other hand, that's how it has always been, right? And the balance has always been pretty good with that. So it's not like you can equate things one-to-one. They're also cheaper with 60 gold. They can also deny experience when they detonate. They're the only unit they can dispel at tier 1. They can hide on trees that cannot be attacked across many places in the map. They can gather lumber anywhere after scouting. There's so many advantages. They're faster than a peon. There's so many advantages they have. You cannot just look one-to-one and compare to others. So the next question is, okay, how does this change the Wisp plus 10 HP? Well, the Tauren Shockwave, the Tauren Chieftain Shockwave at level 2 does 130. So it used to kill Wisps, and it still does. Not a lot changed there, specifically when talking about Shockwave. War Stomp didn't used to kill them, still won't. 10 HP does mean 1 or 2, like 1 extra hit or half an extra hit for most units, most average damage you could have in the game. So Wisp have 1 more hit of HP from many things. So a Blade Master in the current meta needs extreme luck to kill a Wisp in 4 hits. Like a level 1 Blade Master does not kill a Wisp in 4 Wisps, except like once in 100 or once in 50 or once in 20 times, based on experience. Like, he has a large damage range, but it is not stochastic. It's not linear distribution of the damage. It's usually in the center, which is a bell curve. The damage spread in Warcraft 3 is a bell curve because of multiple dice rolls. And so Blade goes from 4 hits to and maybe sometimes 4 hits, but generally 5, and then he's gonna go to always 5 or maybe sometimes 6. I don't know. Right? Mountain King with 110 damage Thunderclap does not currently kill Wisps and still will not. He will leave them at 20 instead of 10, and that is definitely one difference in hit by a footman, a rifle. Though a hero probably will still kill in a single hit. So any human basic unit will need 2 hits instead of 1 after clap level 2. Carrion Swarm. This is the big one actually. Carrion Swarm does 125 damage. And the Wisp used to have 120 life, so you could level 2 Carrion Swarm and wipe out a Wisp line if they were lazy enough to put all the Wisps in the same place. And that won't be possible anymore. They'll all be 5 HP. And I think that is not a good thing. If, and this is a completely disembodied feedback, I'm not giving a value judgment yet on whether I think Wisp HP should be buffed or not. But if they are going to be buffed, it should at most be to 5, plus 5. So that Carrion Swarm still one-shots them. You could of course say, Carrion Swarm is a problem. Level 2 Carrion Swarm is too good against Wisps. Dreadlord Openers or Dreadlord 2nd against Night Elf are a problem. But they are not. Right? We don't see Dreadlord against Night Elf at all until maybe level 3 Dreadlord in a Gargoyle versus Hippogriff standoff. And it's usually not a 3rd hero Dreadlord that gets to level 3 that threatens Wisp that is the largest problem in the matchup in general. So that I think it should not be pushed to 130 because at the casual level, let's say, you can still see Swarm Wisps. Then, next up, Death Coil. Currently, Death Coil does 100 damage against enemies, and that means that for the most part, one coil and one skeleton hit, or one coil and one ghoul hit, can kill a Wisp. And this is going to be a big difference, where Wisp will survive one physical hit from the skeleton and the ghoul, guaranteed, and might even survive an auto attack from the Death Knight, along with a coil, which has never been the case before. And so the question is that a good thing? Is that something that Night Elf needs? So the base damage for Death Knight is 25 to 35, and if the Wisp is going to have 20 health after, he dies, the Death Knight, but with 30 health, it is actually 50-50 whether he will survive against the Death Knight. And that is a huge change and a buff for Night Elf. Maybe that favors... maybe that's a good change for Night Elf Undead, because Wisps are a big target for Undead to harass. But I don't think in general this is a good change. Wisps are very powerful, and I don't think it should happen, especially in tandem with everything else. Nature's Blessing Lumber Cast reduced by 50. Nature's Blessing is a very powerful ability, and Lumber is a big resource for Night Elf when going for Ancient of Lore, which they do in most matchups. So it is a relatively big buff. I also don't think that Blessing is poorly priced, or that... I don't even think having buildings have 7 fortified armor is healthy in general. Most buildings in the game have 5 armor, some have less. And the only way to get more than 5 is via Human Masonry, level 3. Imbued Masonry, which is kind of a toxic upgrade. It gives a total of 30% bonus HP and 3 extra armor, leading humans to have 8 fortified armor. I don't think that's a healthy or a good situation in general. And Nature's Blessing gives Ancients 7 HP, and I think that's a lot as well. Of course, this also counts for Treants, which means it's another buff for Keeper meta against human. And I think it is well priced. I don't think it has ever been badly priced. People get this all the time, and it affects every matchup. So I don't think it should happen. Glaive Thrower movement speed I think is a great change. It's very non-meta Glaive. It also buffs Night Elf Mirror Priestess style, together with these 3 changes. And Moonwell buff, these 3 all make Priestess Mirror better. And then... the Glaive Thrower also makes Priestess better. They tend to use Huntress, Archer, Glaive Thrower because that's all they can make if they stay on tier 1, right? And those help against Ancient Protectors, Moonwells, and Dryads, which might be used to counter Huntresses. So more Priestess Mirror might happen, which I think it's fine if that creates more different strategies. It would not be fine if it becomes the only strategy. Overall, I think a lot said. Let's do a little bit more analysis. What about Demon against human? How does Demon Hunter against human change? Well, none of these matter for that. Buff via the Moonwells, nerf via tier 3 Moonwell, but overall I think still a buff. Fan of Knives doesn't affect Demon, Wisp is a buff, Nature's is a buff, and Glaive Thrower doesn't matter. So Demon receives, especially via Moonwell and Wisp, pretty good buffs against human. How does human get buffed against Demon? Well, they lose the arcane feedback mana burn. Rifleman can be used against Demon, right? Will maybe be used. Dragonhawk not super common or meta or popular against Night Elf. So overall, I would say Night Elf improves a little bit in that area as well. And I say a little because it's a small amount of changes, but actually some of the biggest patch changes are this Wisp and this Moonwell. And I think it could be a problem. I just don't think this Wisp HP thing should be done for any matchup. Because it's too global. It's better to target problem matchups via changes that only affect that matchup. Such as if you recognize Night Elf only use Hippo Rider against Undead and they need help against Undead, buff the Hippo Rider. right? Change their 30-second mount dismount cooldown and make a 10-second mount dismount so that they can have a bit more flexibility there. The Fan of Knives change is going to have a consistent target count. 6 units can be targeted at level 1, 2, and 3. I think that's a good change because the tooltip doesn't say anything about the amount of targets it actually has. So it's extremely untransparent. It's like, oh, it does 5, then 6 and 7? Or does it say something about it? But either way, I don't think it's a good thing to have different targets. It's going to be 666. 666 for Fok, Fan of Knives. Max damage goes up at level 1, and it goes slightly up by level 2, and then it goes down quite a bit by level 3. So better at level 1 and worse at level 3. Right? Interchangeable at level 2. And then Fan of Knives damage, this is max damage. This is the actual damage per target. And the reason this exists is because Carrion Swarm and Shockwave, maybe not Shockwave, Carrion Swarm and Fan of Knives have a kind of hidden damage cap, unlike Shockwave or Thunderclap. Blizzard and Flamestrike, I think, also have damage caps. Basically, if more units are within their damage range, then they don't end up doing full damage to all of the units. There's a kind of strange mitigation process. I don't know the exact numbers, but there's some kind of mitigation process. That's why this exists. Fan of Knives goes from 75 at level 1 to 70, which is actually a nerf. Minus 5, and then at level 2 it's plus 5, and then at level 3 it's plus 10. So they hit one more target for 5 damage less, but the damage cap is up a bit. Pretty difficult to parse the changes or to understand the effect it's meant to achieve, so I don't have much of an opinion on it. Let's go to Undead. Undead gets a 5-second buff on the Haunted Goldmine build time. Basically what this means is that they will have the goldmine 5 seconds faster, if not harassed, which means they get 10 gold per second if fully mining, 5 seconds faster. You get 10 gold per second on a fully mining goldmine, which means this is a 50 gold advantage. It also makes it 5 seconds less likely to be cancelled by an opponent that tries to cancel the gold mine. Currently, Undead has had the best expansion situation that they've ever had in the history of Warcraft 3. Back from 2004 to 2019, Undead pretty much couldn't expand almost ever, but especially couldn't fast expand at tier 1. That has been a lot more common, and strategically that has made Undead Human more interesting. In the past, Human would expand, Undead would all in with DK Lich Pitlord, and then Human would go workshops and Undead would either die or they would kill the expansion. It was very binary and boring, and it has been a lot more interesting with both races expanding and then fighting with a variety of different strategies, which has included gargoyles, ghouls, destroyers, and necro wagons, and Human has gone both air, ground, as well as workshop style. So there's more strategical variation, which I think is a good thing. Does Goldmine need the buff? I'm not sure. We don't see a lot of Undead expansion against Orc anymore. That strategy was pretty much buried with the removal of Cryptlord double B-tail summoning. When Cryptlord was very strong in 2020, we saw a lot of Goldmine expanding by Undead at tier 1. Pretty OP, but it is really not meta anymore against Orc. This might make it more meta. Might. Right? It is a significant buff to something very core. Now, Undead against Human. This will help Undead against Human quite a bit. How is Human against Undead? Right? Because we have to look at every matchup. Polymorph barely matters. Arcane is nerfed against Undead. Sundering is nerfed against Undead. Rifleman might help, and Dragonhawk might help. So okay, we have remembered that. So Goldmine is a buff against Human, obviously. Normal or piercing Nerubian. Mostly, this depends on how you attack the Undead base. Piercing is better against air. Normal is better against ranged. So rifles, they die more to normal. Piercing helps against Dragonhawk Griffin. But Dragonhawks often bring Cloud. when you have Dragonhawk Griffin style. So it doesn't really matter what they have, it's going to get clouded anyway, which means that their attack gets shut down. But piercing, better against casters, worse against heroes, it's worse against rifles. Overall, I do think this was a good change. It's pretty long to talk about every aspect, so let's move on. Ghoul Frenzy research time, plus 5 seconds. The previous consideration was going to 60. And that is quite a big change, a 15-second timing delay. Big changes can be risky. Many people felt it was justified, but I prefer the more measured approach of something in between as well. Plus 5 is not a big change. This one though, Ghoul Frenzy movement speed, bonus movement speed, down from plus 80 to plus 50. So the Ghoul's movement speed right now is 270, which you can see if I move this here. The Ghoul's movement speed is 270 right now, and then they become 350. So what else is 270? The Tauren. What is the Tauren? Tauren is very slow. So Ghouls and Taurens are both slow. Taurens are becoming 290 with the patch. And Ghouls used to become 350. So let's look at some other units. Where is the Huntress? I believe Huntress is 350. So the Ghoul became as fast as the Huntress and would now only be 320. So what else is 320? Let's take a look at Warden without Boots of Speed. Warden without Boots of Speed is 320. So the Ghoul goes from Huntress movement speed with Ghoul Frenzy to Warden movement speed. Now keep in mind, Ghoul with no Frenzy are not valid as a fighting unit in the anywhere beyond like tier 1. Undeads don't fight a lot with tier 2 ghouls. It happens a bit, but they're not a problem, let's put it that way, because they're slow. They gain a significant buff from the 35% attack speed that they get from Ghoul Frenzy, and the 80 movement speed. 80 is a lot, right? But they kind of need it as well to be good. Now ghouls have been overrunning Night Elves in particular a bit with their timings, and Orc, which is actually why Orcs have stopped building Headhunter builds in the current meta, though it can change again. They've stopped doing Blade Grunts and Farseer Headhunter because the Ghoul Frenzy timing was so strong that Orcs are now pretty much just cheesing every game and going Wind Riders against Undead, right? So perhaps a nerf is justified, but I think minus 30 is way too much. Minus 30 is going to make Ghoul, I think, quite bad. I think it's too much. I would suggest going from 80 to 70. I know that may not be what some people want to hear about, you know, getting Ghouls nerfed or whatever, but I think there's two things to keep in mind. First of all, the 20 movement speed buff on Demolishers and Meatwagons and Glaive, try it out for yourself. It is actually really impactful. 10, 20 movement speed is a lot. Even 10 nerf will be well felt, right? At 50 bonus movement speed, they can't even catch and surround heroes anymore, which is kind of their uniqueness, ghouls. At this much movement speed, which will be 270 plus 50 is 320, ghouls are just like extremely fragile grunts or extremely fragile bears or something, right? Like they're slow and they're also very low on HP. Unholy Aura and Endurance Aura were nerfed 4 years ago. They don't do 10, 20, 30 movement speed anymore. They do 7, 14, 21%, right? So they had already been nerfed on that as well. Everything is. Every movement speed was. I think this is too much. I think 70 would actually put them in a pretty good spot, personally. The second thing to keep in mind, and I think we don't see this enough, if we're judging things on Happy, I think he is currently in his form the best Warcraft 3 player I've ever seen. And of course he doesn't have as many accolades way back when, you know, when Warcraft 3 had the biggest bustling esports scene, and somehow that matters as well. And you cannot like compare someone that played 20 years ago to someone that plays actively now. But I think he's very good, and targeting nerfs just to target him, in particular him, because I don't think 120 and Labyrinth are as big of a problem for the rank 2 and the rank 3 player of the other races, right? Is Labyrinth a huge problem for SOC, then okay, maybe you can talk more. But mostly it's happy. Mostly it's happy, in my opinion anyway. So I think we shouldn't overreact just to punish Happy. He won so much in the last 4 years, so nerfing him seems to make sense, but I don't think it's deserved if it's just one guy. Right? Next, Curse. Curse duration. I think justified. Banshees are quite good. I actually priced them at tier B. But maybe, and I do think actually tier B is correct, but because they don't see, they're not like OP in every matchup, like you always take them or you rush them or something. But Curse is really quite strong and probably lasts too long. So I think this is fine. Cripple targeting mechanicals. I like this because Necromancers are still extremely non-meta. We don't see them pretty much at all. And this could give Undead an alternative way to counter, in particular, Flying Machines and Siege Engines. But Flying Machines are really cheap to cast such an expensive spell, so it's mostly about Siege Engines. And we do see some Siege Engines of Human against Undead. And we usually don't see them countered by Necros, but by Mud Golem, Ghouls, and Meat Wagons. And so I think Necros could be a pretty cool way to maybe deal with them, and Necros happen to be quite strong against Human Mounting first in general. So I think it can really become a strategy, but it requires research and development. For Scroll of Healing removal, I've commented on this before, not having it be in the Tomb of Relics, the Tomb of Relics. I think it's a great change. It forces undeads to compete for invulnerability and heal scroll at the neutral goblin shop, just like anybody else. Wand of Negation added to the Tomb of Relics. 2 charges, 150 gold, 5 second cooldown, available at tier 2, hidden behind the Temple of the Damned, unlocked behind the temple. I think this is a fantastic change. I super agree on this. Was kind of my idea as well, and I think the reasoning for it is very sound, because if Undead still wants to go get their Dispel from Destroyer at 9.5 minutes, they go Slaughterhouse, they go tier 3. If Undead wants to go Slaughterhouse, Rush, and tier 3 and Destroyer and Orb of Corruption, they cannot get Temple, which means they cannot get Wand of Negation, which means it doesn't end up becoming OP, right? Because Wand of Negation early is particularly strong to remove Slow, Hex, and Tangle. And Feral Spirits, Water Elemental, Rod of Skeletons. So it's best against those. And if you give it at tier 2, that's way too strong. It just invalidates Keeper, it invalidates Shadow Hunter, it invalidates Water Elemental to a degree, right? And Feral Spirits. But hiding it behind Temple, kind of genius, because now Undead would have to go either Slaughter and Temple and tier 3, which is costly, and then buy Wand of Negation. Or they go tier 3 with Temple instead of Slaughterhouse, which means they have no access to either Destroyers or Obsidian statues, which is huge. Those are pivotal in the current meta. And then they can go Banshee or Necro instead, which means they're either playing Unholy Frenzy Pitlord or Unholy Frenzy Lich, or they're playing Curse-based or Anti-Magic Shell-based style. And then you get Wand of Negation, so you have your Dispel. And this can be as early as 6 minutes if you rush with 3 ghouls to tier 2, or 6 minute 30 if you do like a 6 ghoul or 5 ghoul opening with no graveyard. And so Dispel can come down from 9 minute 30 to 6 minute 30, but then you have to give up early tier 3, or you have to give up map control if you go tier 3 and Temple and Slaughter. So they have to make choices, and I think this will be an interesting choice for Undead, which is a buff to couple some of the nerfs they have, including Scroll of Healing, Curse, Ghoul Frenzy, and Frost Nova. So Meat Wagon plus 20 I think is a good idea. The movement speed plus 20. Maybe Meat Wagon should only be plus 10 because Necro Wagon might be OP, but I doubt it. Necro Wagon does have potential against Orc, Human, and Night Elf. It's worst against other undeads because of Destroyers, but it's actually quite good against Human, Elf, and Orc. I feel like it's always been around the corner of viability, but isn't viable because of the pacing. the pacing and the opportunity cost. But what I'm trying to say is, if you get it, it is quite tough to counter, but you can't get it in the current meta because of the timing and the opportunity cost. Make it good enough, and it's going to be worth it to go to it. So it's interesting. Let's put a pin in this and see. But so far, at the moment, this is a buff, a significant buff, like the demo and the glaive thrower, to something deeply non-meta. But less deeply non-meta than glaive and demo. We do see some necro wagons sometimes. And I say sometimes, against like Mountain King opening when they fast expand, you can do it. Frost Nova slow duration goes down 0 seconds at level 1, 1 second at level 2, and 2 seconds at level 3 against units. I think this is deserved. This is an extremely potent ability with a huge slow on units. It's very strong. It will still be strong, but I do think it's deserved. Criplord Impale mana cost. Criplord currently does not get played pretty much at all. Used to be played as a first. That's mostly dead now. And he used to be played as a third, and that is also dead now. People prefer Pitlord, Dark Ranger, or Dreadlord as a third. So buffing him, why not, right? Death and Decay buff, again, why not? It's fine. It's very non-meta. Gets a small buff, it's fine. Web, this is a pretty big one. And if it wasn't for this, I might even worry about Wyvern buff. Because Wyvern, to the best of my knowledge and our communal understanding, will only be played against undead. So will this make it too strong against undead? Well, in conjunction with the web buff of 50-50 resources, we may see a shift away from Gargoyle Destroyer into web. And considering you can also do Temple and then get Curse, which is quite good against Wyverns, and then get 1 of Negation against Hex, which is quite good against Farseer, Feral Spirits, Shadow, Hex. I think Gargoyle Destroyer, like if you don't go for Gargoyle Destroyer, but you go for Fiend and you stay on tier 2, right? You go for Fiend and Necromancer, or you go for Fiend and Banshee. I think that is so good against Farseer, Shadow, Wyverns. Might kill Wyverns again. It might make them non-viable. But that requires research and development from both the Orc and from the Undead, so I cannot give a definitive answer on it. I think this change together with the Wyvern change are good changes. It is a nerf to Hippo Riders against Undead. That is true. It is a nerf for Hippo Riders against Undead. That is true. And for Fairy Dragons. As for Undead against Human, also impactful. The web upgrade is also a buff for Human Air. It's a buff for Undead against Human Air. So it could be a contentious change. But I just have to honestly admit I'm not sure about this one, how it's going to be. But I think it is positive for Orc Undead because Wyverns got another buff. If Wyverns did not get that buff, then this would be further killing them to be completely non-viable in any matchup. But together, I think it's interesting. Though, I don't know how it'll work too much in the other matchups. And then finally, Abomination plus 2 damage. Abominations, we see either 1 or none, which is a pity because they're so pretty. This is nice. Maybe we'll see more than 1 Abomination. They're still worse than Taurens, straight up, right? If Abominations fight Taurens. Abomination against Knight, still mostly worse than Knights, right? People don't make more than 1. They get 1 for tanking or they get 1 for Disease Cloud, and that's it. I don't remember the last time I saw more than 1 Abomination in either FFA or 4-on-4 or 1-on-1. So giving them a damage increase, I think is fine. Could be interesting. Boneyard. Boneyard 25 gold cheaper. Freezing Breath 50 lumber cheaper, I think are extremely justified. Worms by now are extremely non-meta, deeply non-meta. And giving that buffs is fine and nice for variety. Frost Breath, I suggested they get the +1 second on hero slow after upgrading Freezing Breath. Looks like Blizzard went with a straight up buff against heroes. Keep in mind, this used to be 10 seconds on heroes and 10 seconds on units. Now it's 10 seconds on units, 3 seconds on heroes. Taking it from 3 to 4 puts it much closer to how it is now than how it used to be. And how it used to be is that we saw some Frostworms against Night Elf and Orc, but not a lot. Maybe against Night Elf the most. It was like DK Lich Gargoyle into Frostworm against Demon, Naga, Bear, Dryad. And we're still much closer to 3 than to 10, so I don't think it's going to be a problem. But if it is, hell, it'll be a new problem at least. New compared to the last 3-4 years where worms do not see play at all. So I think this is a good change. So what is my summary on Undead? Big buff. I doubt it's justified on the gold mine. Nerubian good. Frenzy, I think this is good. I think the movement speed nerf is a little overdone, should be 70. These I think are all really good. All of this. Web will have to wait and see, and I think these are all good. Now overall, does this nerf or buff Undead? Undead mostly is getting nerfed on meta and buffed on non-meta. So overall it might be a nerf if you make no changes for the most part. If you make no changes in your play as an Undead player, but a buff to Goldmine. Overall, I do think Undead is getting pretty good changes. It's relatively well balanced. Night Elf is the biggest winner in the current version of the patch notes. Not going to repeat everything I said before. Orc is the biggest winner if the new research and development works for Demolisher's Healing Word Tauren. But it's non-meta stuff. Gonna have to wait and see whether these non-meta changes will make any difference at all. It's also possible you see barely any change in Orc. Either the buffs or the nerfs do not really have a lot of change. So they might look exactly the same. You might see some experimentation with Taurens, Healing Word, Wind Riders or Demolishers, but there might be not much change. Orc is probably the least affected. Human gets some meta nerfs and some non-meta buffs, and then some meta buffs. So overall, I'd say it really depends. It's not easy to say who is the biggest loser, though Night Elf is the biggest winner in this current version. Would I say that Night Elf is the best race right now? I don't think so. I think the best race right now is either human or undead. And so, with that in mind, I think we could have many universes where we saw worse patch notes. So overall, I'm pretty positive about it. And everything else that I said before stands. Okay, so let's go to the next changes. Neutral changes. Firelord Volcano building damage factor down from ×3 damage to ×2 against buildings. Fine. Right? Soulburn buffs, I previously talked about this. I think it's fine. Tornado buff is fine. Mana shield, fine. This is a new one. Goblin Zeppelin food cast increase from 0 to 1. I have two opinions on this. One, Zeppelins are fun to play with. They're pretty fun to play against. They're fun to spectate for viewers. Right? And this makes them slightly worse, which means we'll see less of them, which is a negative for all the reasons that I just mentioned. That's the first part. The second part, what I'm saying, is Zeppelin's value. Zeppelins are 240 gold, 60 lumber, hire every 30 seconds on cooldown at laboratory, and offer up to 8 slots